I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am, I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am, I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not even ready to slow down. Just slow down. I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive, I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already. I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am, I don't understand, I'm doing.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to PSGL here in PCF5, and we are going for round number 5 at Suzuka, Japan. My name is Daniel Gilligan, and alongside me in the virtual commentary box today is, of course, Mr. Reese Gregory. Reese, how are you doing today?
I'm doing exceptionally well. I'm excited to actually be back in Japan. It's been a hot minute for me. It's been nearly 2 years since I've done anything on Japan, and I feel like it's an underrated track that always gets tossed to the side, so exceptionally happy that we're back here.
Underrated? Japan? Crikey. There's, right, we need some educating. This is undoubtedly one of the absolute community highlight tracks, I think it's fair to say. Amongst any F1 fan, you get them to name their best circuits, the likes of Spa, Silverstone and Suzuka invariably do come up. This circuit, of course, the only figure of 8 circuit on the Formula 1 calendar as well, and it is tight, twisty and complicated with just the one DRS zone. So in terms of that, we're not going to see massive differences in terms of overtaking areas and things like that. Not in any artificial sense with the use of DRS though, and we'll be looking more towards the likes of clever movement and positioning through the corners to then maybe catch people unawares into the likes of, say, I don't know, take your pick. The hairpin, maybe into the Degners or something like that. Maybe not the Degners. They're a bit too quick. But yeah, you're going to be having all sorts of areas around this circuit where it's probably going to be more difficult to overtake, unless, of course, we have weather not too dissimilar to how the race started off last time out in Mexico.
Oh, don't get me started in Mexico. The day I needed you and what time my voice went. But what a dramatic race indeed. It was full of action, it was full of surprises, and we saw Vincent take the win, closing the gap to only 3 points now behind his teammate Theon. And Dimitri, once again, finding himself in such a strong position, getting the third in his career, and that's only 7 points behind, so it's still all to play for. But I think the biggest loser from last race was Jerry Van Bussel, trying to go onto the slicks extremely early, and it just didn't work out for him, which is unfortunate. But he is still well, he's actually in 4th. I've just realized the numbers haven't been switched around. No, he is in 4th. I'm reading the wrong section of the graph. He is in 4th, 21 points off the leader, but he's lost a bit of ground, but he's not out of this championship.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, these things can all turn around very quickly. I mean, of course, without the did not start, for instance, in round 2, then Vincent Nyquist would be, you would imagine, given their pace in the other 3 rounds, a bit higher up this table. There's only one place higher they can go up this table, that being P1 itself, which is currently occupied by the teammate Fionn McKee. And then, of course, that means then no prizes for guessing who's leading the Constructors' Championship, that being, of course, McLaren with 1 and 2 in the drivers, and then, of course, Dimitri Minic in 3rd place currently as well, just 7 points off of 2nd place Vincent Nyquist, and then 10 points off of Fionn McKee's current lead. Now, if we were to get a repeat of Mexico last time out, with, of course, pole position going to Vincent, and then 2nd and fastest lap going to Fionn, points at the end of this round, at the end of the halfway point of the season, it would then be Vincent Nyquist taking the lead of this Drivers' Championship. So, all to play for at this particular round for the 2 McLaren drivers. I think maybe an instance where Fionn maybe needs to stamp a bit more authority now back onto this championship. They've had a good result in every round so far, I think it's fair to say, though, of course, in the States, they didn't get the absolute best result. They weren't on the podium, unlike the other 3 rounds that they've taken part in. And when that's the one race in which your main title rival is not taking part, then that's really the one where you need to capitalise and get as many points as possible.
Yeah, very true indeed. And the one thing we should never rule out is Dimitri, sitting comfortably in 3rd. He's probably the biggest threat of them all, having raced in all races. Okay, race 1 in Austria didn't work out for him all too well, but he still got a point on the board, so that got him started. And then next thing you know, a win in Miami, and then following up 3rd from somewhere down the grid. P9 he started in round 4 in Mexico and cruise up the grid. And he's not a one-shot type guy. He's not one that does qualifying, but he will come up through that grid and find his position amongst the top 3. So never rule out Dimitri in that Alfa Romeo, because he will find pace, he will find something to be up your rear end. So the 2 McLarens, yes, are comfortable, but they also need to look behind as well.
They do. In terms of their own title aspirations, they definitely need to be keeping one eye over their shoulder at Dimitri Minic. Jerry Van Bussel as well, of course, if not, as you rightly pointed out, the slight strategy mishap. And, you say that out loud, you think maybe they were driving for Ferrari. Nope, they're still a Williams driver. But with 0 points scored last time out, it does make life a bit more difficult for them. But if they get a good result whilst then the 2 cars at the top end up having a bad one, then that's going to make life very easy for them. I think one of the trends that we've started to see out of these first 4 rounds, or certainly through the rounds in which Vincent was taking part, so rounds 1, 3 and 4, Vincent tends to be able to qualify very well, and if they get the pole, they go on to get the win. However, if they don't get the pole, then life becomes a bit more difficult for them. They have to then, it just sort of reminds me a bit in a sense of Sebastian Vettel's days at Red Bull. If he's on pole, gets a good start, disappears off into the distance, he'll then just manage the race pace and no one will be able to touch him. However, in that very Sebastian Vettel sort of a way, there's not then been any miraculous drive from sort of very far down the grid or any wins from outside of pole position. So it's one of these things where I think Vincent is going to have to just make sure that they keep their qualifying form correct, and then the results should then follow as in accordance to that. Now, one driver who you mentioned there is not necessarily our qualifying hero this season is Dimitri Minic, and they have only taken pole on one occasion, but there's that one occasion where they then went on to win. So they're very, very good off of the race start. So they're able to make up positions very quickly, take advantage of all the chaos of a race start, but then if they don't have to do all that work, like with a pole position, it puts them in a very, very good place to then go on and win the race. So these are things which they will need to, a good qualifying performance, improving that qualifying form will then make life an awful lot easier for them headed forward, I think.
Absolutely. Another driver I want to quickly talk about is Kozzy. He's the only driver in the top group that has not scored a podium, but he is leading the mid-pack comfortably in 6th place. I think I've counted that right. Hang on a minute. Oh no, sorry, it's Kinty. Sorry, it's Kinty. Yeah, Kinty above? I cannot. I need to get a ruler out.
Kinty's in 5th, Kozzy's in 6th. Kozzy has, you're absolutely right, not scored a podium just yet.
Yeah, so he is the top runner. He's been running kind of in the mid-pack, and, I'll always reference this because he mentioned it, bigged himself up, did well in the tier above, got himself some good points there, won the tier below, and now he's in that middle ground, comfortably in the middle. Are we going to see him get some podium positions? He's not been fighting podium yet, but he's definitely holding his own. He's currently in a mixed battle with 17 points with Kinty, Matti Di Campo. So he is amongst them. So I would like to see maybe a higher position from him because he's gone 4.544. Is he going to go back to 5?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you never know. Maybe they'll get 5. Maybe they'll get even more points than that. Who knows? Who's to say? Of course, you can then get 6 points. You can even then go and get 10 points, 12 points, and 16 points. Those, of course, being for the podium positions. We don't have quite 25 points like in Formula 1 for a race win here in PSGL, but that, in theory, keeps things closer. Makes it so that nobody ends up disappearing off into the distance with an enormous, unassailable lead. But speaking of enormous, unassailable leads, I do wish that we'd had an enormous, unassailable lead of drivers all readying up and going into the session, because we're still waiting. We're waiting for the race to get going, or for qualifying to get going even. We're nearly 10 minutes after the start of this session, but drivers are still not readying up just yet.
Is this normal? I've become so used to this that it gets to a point where it's typical. If you're a league driver, this is standard. There's always that person that's just ran in late and it's like, give me a second, hold up, I'm just starting up my PC, and that PC takes about 5 minutes to start up, and it takes a while, but hopefully we get everybody in, and we do start readying up very soon. So we're gonna start prodding them, get the fingers out, poke them around, and hopefully we get going somewhat soon. While we wait, I think I do have a lovely break ad, so we'll put us onto a break, and when we get ready and readying up, we'll come back to the stream.
So here we are then at the circuit of Suzuka here. Technically an anti-clockwise track. It's the only figure of 8 circuit on the F1 calendar with 18 turns here around the circuit. and then we will, of course, be headed through a great deal of elevation changes. You know, we start nice and low at turn number 1 before then rising all the way uphill, all the way up to then 130R, that final proper corner before we then come to the Casio Triangle chicane right at the end of the circuit, before then blowing back down the hill, back down towards the start-finish line and down towards turn 1 once more. With that crossover point, it's after the second Degner. You'll be going underneath 130R. The corner, of course, made famous by Fernando Alonso, going around the outside of Michael Schumacher in 2005. But not just the only event to happen in 2005, but that race, of course, being Kimi Raikkonen's mad dash from outside the top 10 to then be able to take the win that particular day. So, hopefully, we will get to see some of those heroics and those antics in today's race. Right now, then, everybody is in qualifying. We've managed to rouse everybody from their rest, it seems, and into the session we've gone. We've got 18 minutes on the clock, then, for those of you who are new to PSGL. First of all, hello, welcome. You're very welcome indeed. Now, in terms of what we do here, we don't run the full Q1, 2, 3 session like you would see in Formula 1 in real life. Instead, we have a short qualifying session. So, 18 minutes of track time, set as many laps as you have tyres available, and then try and set the best time you possibly can. There's no knockouts or anything like that. It is simply wherever you finish, that is your qualifying position, unless, of course, you pick up a grid penalty, which is possible to do, although I'm yet to see anybody manage that so far in this championship. So it's hopefully going to go and continue that particular record as we head through this qualifying session as well. And right now we are on board with Joris in the Williams, headed up over the top now of, well, this is now through Dunlop Curve, all the way down towards that first Degner corner. And there you go, they chuck it in. Well, I say they chuck it in. We're on an outlap at the moment. There's no chucking to be done because the tyres are cold and everybody's getting ready to go. Any thoughts on this particular track and the requirements on the driver or the car?
Well, it's one of those technical ones where you do need more downforce, particularly because there are a lot of swooping curves. Now, it will vary because you do have some good straights. You've got turn 14 to turn 16 with 130R in the middle of it, where you are straight lining. And then, of course, you've got a little bit from 18 to first, where there is some straights. But majority of the time, it is swooping, so the downforce will come in handy. Nothing to the degree that you would need in somewhere like Singapore, where there's a high amount of downforce needing, but you need to get that right balance, because otherwise you're going to have a huge amount of understeer and it's going to screw you over.
Absolutely. Nicely put. And now through the final chicane we go, and then power down the hill. They're going to go right to the outside here. They might draw right over to the inside as they finish that, but by going around the outside, there's more circuit you can use to then build up as much speed as you can as we head then down here into turn number 1. So into 1 we go, immediately followed up by 2. We're a little bit wide of both apexes, but as long as the minimum speed is kept up, that's the most important thing. Then into the S's we go then. And this is a really flowing part of the circuit here. Unless it's raining, you don't tend to see many overtakes here. Famously, of course, Daniel Ricciardo overtook around the outside through here in the rain in the Japanese Grand Prix of 2014. Now, as we head up and over the top through Dunlop, then we now head to that first Degner corner, then the second Degner just coming up here now, and then as we hook the car through the apex there onto the exit curbs on the outside, we then go up towards the hairpin. And then this one, then there's a difference in thoughts, whether you go for the apex here or whether you take a wider line and keep up speed through a longer distance. But then, as you power out, we then head down the hill through what is known as 200R, this particular long radius corner here, before we then head into Spoon Curve. So we've got a couple of corners here that make up Spoon, and then we power down the hill. So this then, an old grid selection. You can see all the grid slots there on the tarmac, and then we head up towards 130R, this famous corner. It's not really much of a corner in a Formula 1 car anymore. And so through the corner we go then, the car's sticking nice and tight to the inside there. And then through the chicane we go. Things very close indeed, almost invalidating the lap. But then as we come through the final corner, a bit of an oversteering moment and towards the line, keeping it tight to the inside. And that's the first time there, given to us by Joris, and it is a 128.981.
Yep, and here comes Fionn, the leader of the championship. Only goes a tenth, or nearly 2 tenths faster than Joris, doing a 128. 8. So is this the benchmark we're going to see today from the leader, or are we going to see some surprises to come out? To note, this track has a few areas where it's easy to invalidate. Exit of turn 2 is an easy area to invalidate. The first Degner, easy to invalidate. And also the exit of turn 14 on the spoon curve, another area to invalidate. And if you're really unlucky and run a bit wide on 130R.
Absolutely, yes indeed. So in terms of the drivers that are still out there and doing stuff, well, Kinty has just finished off a lap in their Ferrari. We're also then seeing on screen, of course, Vincent Nyquist currently on a lap, but that lap has been invalidated. You can see there from the great big red track map in the bottom right hand of your picture. And so therefore, Vincent will not be posting a time to the leaderboard, you would imagine. Unless, of course, yep, no, there they go. They're jumping right out the way now as the Aston Martin comes by. So they are on an in-lap at the moment. That Aston Martin in particular was Roman. But now we focus instead on Wanda. Or at least they appear as Wanda on my screen and something entirely different on yours there.
Wanda, what? The Frankie is Wanda on yours?
Yeah, apparently, yeah, Franek is Wanda on my screen, so that's something I'm gonna have to remember. But they put in a wonderful lap, as it turns out, and jump up to P2 in the standings so far. Yeah, that must be just a difference in terms of name tags. Maybe if you've had them as a friend or something, then they show differently or something like that. I don't know. But there we are. So, no idea. That's just the wonderful ways in which Steam works, I suppose. So we watch then as the Williams dives into the pits there. We've also then got the Alfa Romeo on what I suspect will be an in-lap at the moment, that being Days Rhombus at the moment, going through 130R. And then rapidly approaching the chicane, the Williams, I think that was, jumping out of the way. And then I suspect we'll see them go into the pits in the not-too-distant future. Roman, though, has decided to just go a bit too wide in turn number 1. And that has meant that they have probably ended up starting off a lap which is not going to be massively competitive. That being said, those tyres are now 1 lap old and there's no time on the board. So it could be like Vincent, they may well have invalidated and might now just be doing an in-lap to get themselves back in. Dmitry Minich, however, is the other driver on an outlap at the moment. We're having a look at Mattia at the moment as they have crossed the line, set their time to go P3 overall, and now Dmitry Minich is the driver in view. So they head down towards 130R on their outlap. By this point, the tyres should be up to temperature, and then we're going to head into the chicane now. Casio chicane, it's been known as through the years, and now as they head on through, trying to maximize the exit speed as much as they possibly can. They then take that long route round, open the DRS, and we will start the lap with Dmitry Minich. So down towards turn number 1 then. The Alfa Romeo hitting 200 miles an hour before we then get into turn number 1 here, before chucking the car in and then threading it through here. Again, a little bit like we saw earlier on with Joris, and not quite hitting both apexes, but sometimes you don't necessarily want to around this circuit. Sometimes with the banking of the corners, it means that you can then have a nice easy run, taking a bit of a longer line but carrying more speed through. And Dmitry then heads up over the top and through Dunlop Curve. This will then be the end of the first sector split. Is it quick? It certainly seems to be. Purple's first sector so far, but then they've just overstepped the mark. Headed out the exit of Degner 1, it's then affected them into Degner 2, and then the run here up towards the hairpin. This is then going to ultimately be a measure of how much that's affected the lap overall, I expect. They may well have lost a couple of tenths there, and they've invalidated as well. So that will be the end of Dmitry Minich's first run.
Once again, I said to you earlier, Degner 1 is an area of invalidation, and it's just the rear end just stepped out a little bit too far, and Dmitry not putting a lap on the board. Is there a curse behind Dmitry at the moment? Because that's his second run he's tried and a second invalidation. So he's not looking to be going for a good lap time, unless he can pull something out the bag later in this qualifying session, as we keep an eye on Fionn, who will be starting his lap very soon.
Yes, indeed. They are headed down that back straight at the moment. Just a little bit of extra tyre warming before we head through 130R, and it looks like they're fighting the back end of the car just a little bit. They're trying to maybe just generate a bit of wheel spin, get a bit of surface temperature into those tyres, and then as they head through the chicane here, let's see, are they going to take a... Yep, so it's a bit more of a line to try and maximise that exit. Run out wide, open the DRS, and away we go then. So down towards turn number 1 we will go, and we will stick on this lap here. Handy camera angle that we've been given there. But I've got the onboards on my screen on the T-Cam, so I will tell you what's going on there if we can't necessarily see it on the broadcast. So, through turns 1 and 2 then, no dramas there, as you'd expect. And then through the S's we go, hit both curbs so far on the apexes, again there on that part, and then just a little bitty wide in the final part. So now, as we head up and through Dunlop Curve, this is then going to be this big, long left-hander at the end of that first sector then. It's not a purple first sector. They're actually 200ths slower than their previous personal best. Of course, they are the pace setter at the moment, so you'd expect their best to be amongst the best of the field so far. So, into the hairpin we go then. Again, a bit of a wider line there, a little bit of oversteer on the exit of the corner as well. Having to do a little bit of a counter steer just to be able to arrest that, and now they head down through 200R. And this great big long corner then before we get to the start of the spoon curve section. So through the left-hander, bit wide of the apex on both corners here. I think they're two corners where really you can hit the apex there and carry more speed as a result. So that might be something they'll look to then correct in their third or fourth runs. Now head towards 130R. They've been able to get a small bit of a slipstream there from the car in front. Then take a nice tight line on the exit, not running out all the way to the outside. And then a bit of an early turn in into the chicane there. Hopefully it's not compromised them too much. Joris improves to the 28.6. Can Fionn respond? No, they cannot. Joris takes the new provisional pole spot with the 28.689, and Fionn is with the 128.7, and Vincent Nyquist, the would-be challenger to Fionn's lead in the Drivers' Championship, pumps a time in that is 8 thousandths of a second quicker than what Joris was just able to manage.
Just to note as well, Kozzy put himself into P4, so we were mentioning about him, he's not got a podium yet, but up in P4, that's where he wants to be, and especially if he's eyeing up some bigger points as well. So a great position for him in the Red Bull. Matteo has just started his lap, so he needs to put in a good time. He was in P3 before the second runs began, so a lot of work for Matteo. But as the tracks, as the qualifying goes on, the track puts in a bit more rubber. Track evolution is such thing, and eventually those lap times will get better. So we'll keep an eye on that and see the times slowly improve.
Absolutely, yes we will. We've got Matteo on the screen at the moment, but a driver who has just started their lap is Dimitri Minic. So can we have a look at what they're doing and see how they get on around this lap? Because of course they were very quick in Sector 1 last time round when we were having an eye on them last time. They're using absolutely all the width of the track available to try and maximise their entries here. I think they have upset themselves slightly though, being a bit too greedy into turn 2 in the S's, and then that's compromised then 3 and 4 as well. To head through Dunlop now. Let's see, is that a purple first sector or is that slow? It's not a purple one, and they've just overcooked it too much. Headed through the Degners, unsurprisingly, that's invalidated the lap as well. And oh dear, the pressure now piling on Dimitri Minic.
It is so unfortunate for Dimitri. I don't know if your mic's cut out. Are you still here?
I'm still here.
Yeah,
still here.
Yeah, you are still
or
there.
At least I think I am. Oh, there we go.
It's so unfortunate, but it's again Degner 1 taking a lot of life out of the drivers as Matteo is unable to improve. So that P3 slot that he had has now faded away, and it's not working all too well for him. Jeremy in P7, so not a position he wants to be. He wants to be a bit higher, but critically, Jerry Van Bussel in P4 in the championship, down in P13, which is critical because he's nearly half a second behind the front runners. So has Mexico really knocked his confidence and not feeling it? But you can only assume, and we only wish we could ask the questions to these drivers.
Yeah, it would be nice, but I have a funny feeling they would tell us similar sentiments to shut up Jeff from the previous game. So there we are. Maybe it's something we can ask them afterwards rather than whilst they're driving around. But it would be nice. It would be nice to be able to have that conversation with them. Certainly one driver we'd love to speak to would be, of course, Franek, who's currently pounding around, setting a good time so far, I think. Just keeping an eye on their times whilst we have a look at Alex Berry in the Alpine, just about to start their lap. And as we come through the sector split, no, they're very, very far off their own personal best, are Franek. So Franek will not be improving on this lap. It might be that they're going for a recharge lap, I don't know. But if we head our attentions back to Alex Berry. They head through turns 1 and 2 then, and now they want to get themselves as far over as they can for then the S section here. And then again, making good use of the apexes on all the corners so far. A little bit of a twitchy moment there as they then head up through the final part of the S's and then into the big long left-hander of Dunlop. And now we're going to follow that all the way through. Is that going to be a purple first sector? No, but it is 1.2 tenths quicker for them on their personal best. So 1.2 tenths, that wouldn't get them any further up the timing table. But if they're able to replicate that over the course of the lap, then that would be about a 3.5 tenth improvement. And that would see them gain a few positions, probably up as far as potentially P8 there. So stick with this one, Alex Berry. Let's see what you can do for us in that Alpine. Alpine, of course, running the Renault engine, the only team this season to be doing so. So it has its own unique audio flavour as we go on board. And as they head through the spoon curve then, and now down that long back straight towards 130R, we're going to see another sector split here. What sort of a time are they going to be putting in so far? They've actually lost time in the second sector. So now just 16 thousandths of a second, rather, up on their previous best. And now as they head through the chicane, they take a big chunk out of each of the apex curves and then into the pit straight away, deciding, nope, we're going to get in, we're going to get a new set of tyres, and we're going to go for another run, because that one would not have improved enough, if at all, as the Red Bull then Back to the Futures through them.
Absolutely.
In the pit lane.
Yeah. So critically, we are now on the now or never lap. This is the final opportunity to put a lap in, to get your time on the board, and especially if your name is Dmitry Minik, it's now or never to really get a time, because yes, he is a racer in the sense that he will run his way up through the field, but from P18, I don't think so. He's done it from P9 to P3, but these drivers are fairly matched, so I don't see that really happening unless there is an absolutely amazing safety car and he does something that Kowalski would do, an Xbox Tier 1 driver. I think he's now in the Challengers somewhere, changed his name. But he went from P19 and was able to put himself on the win. So if you can do something like that, then who knows? Joris about to come around the final corner. Again, you'll see the drivers keeping nice and tight. No, he's going to dive into the pits. So Dimitri, all eyes are going to be on you when you cross that line. And, Dad, how much danger is he really in?
A fairly significant amount of danger. I mean, for the psychology of the driver, I mean, you've got now less than a minute and a half to go, so this is the lap that will count. And as a result, you know, they are going to have all of the pressure heaped on them because they don't have a time at all. They're at the back of the field. They're going to need to not only set a time to make sure they then are in the mix, but they need to also, as we were saying earlier on, they need to try and make the time as competitive as possible. Now, the one advantage they do have is that, unless I'm very much mistaken, oh no, I might well be mistaken actually, but they're certainly towards the end of the drivers who are, you know, getting out onto the circuit, setting a lap time. So therefore, they should see the track in some of its better conditions. Of course, in this game, because of the nature of the tyre compounds and how the soft is basically just a qualifying tyre, you don't really tend to see it getting much good use around the race itself. It means that the tracks rubber in a great deal, and you end up seeing a huge amount of rubbering in over the course of the session. That's why I thought personally that Joris was going a bit too early, really, for where they were in the table. They didn't really end up improving as a result. Their time is still the one that they set earlier on. But now, through the first sector there, you can see quite clearly on the track map that that is a purple first sector for Dmitry Minik. So hopefully, to keep things interesting and keep things spicy in the championship, they're going to keep on putting on some good times in here, and a little bit of an oversteering moment headed out through the hairpin, but as long as they were able to gather it up quickly, that shouldn't have affected them too much. And now they'll head on down towards Spoon Curve and then chuck the car into the left-hander there, very close to the apex, about as close as I've seen anybody get to that apex, in fact, so far. So this could bode well for them. They're now going to head up towards the end of that second sector split. This is where we're going to see how competitive they're looking if there's another purple sector here. Jeremy Glinner sets the fastest lap of the session. That's come from nowhere. And Vincent Nyquist is on a lap at the moment. They might improve in just a few moments' time. And they do so. So Vincent retakes that lead, but it's not by much. So coming through the final corner then, what is Dmitry Minik going to do? They put their car in P3, and for a driver who had all the pressure on them, that's not a bad effort whatsoever. Jeremy is going to be absolutely kicking themselves. 0.003 of a second separates them from their first pole position of the season. But as it is, that is not a bad effort from the drivers at the top end of the table. Clearly getting the most out of their cars where the gaps are so incredibly fine between them. We're now having a look at Fionn. in the McLaren. They come around the final turn then. They were on provisional pole some time ago, now it feels, in this session. Will they be able to get back up there? No, they will not. It is P7 at best for them, and some drivers still yet to set a time, including Franek, coming around the final turn now, up towards the line, and they take pole position! Franek Morowiak takes pole position at the Japanese Grand Prix. What a brilliant lap from them. Now, unless anyone is able to go ahead and beat them too, no, but it's a Mercedes all front row. Danny Coe lines up in second place. And now we've got Elliot Norin and Alex Berry, the last cars to finish. Elliot crosses the line, doesn't improve, and Alex improves, but I don't think it's anywhere near the top of the table. And as a result, yep, 16th there, you can see that means it's an all Mercedes front row with Franek taking pole position.
Where have we heard that before? But that being said, Danny in P2. What? Wow. I believe Danny is the reserve driver in this tier, and jumping his way to P2. That's all I have to say is just clapping, because that is a brilliant drive from him. Also, Kozzy, P5, exactly where he wants to be, ahead of Dmitry Minik. Jeremy also up in P4, so a good position for him. And the losers in this is actually the top, necessarily, realistically speaking, the top 3 or top 4 are quite a big losers. Vinnick down in P3, so he's not in the position he wants to be. Jeremy, I believe he was down in P9, which is critically bad for P4 in the championship. And then also Finnick leading this championship, not in a great position, and those skies tell me there is potential for a rainy race.
Oh, well, that is interesting. If we get a bit of rain, that will make, despite the fact that usually if you were to add water rather to some food, it would dilute it and make it a bit less flavoursome. In racing, a bit of rain actually spices things up. It's very nice indeed. So hopefully we get to see some good racing in the not too distant future. Now on my screen, we are still waiting for players to connect, so I really hope this is not technical gremlins rearing their ugly head, but I suspect it may well be the case, as we see all the marshals there in the pit lane doing a nice synchronised bit of head bopping for us there.
You gotta love AIs at the best. It's hilarious. There's no uniqueness to each one. And as a game designer, I see why they just copied and pasted with a little bit of tweaks. But it's still hilarious to see the same movements. Just some in sync, some not. It's brilliant. That's game development for you, ladies and gents. 101, yeah. How kind of not to do it. As we are seeing the timer come down. So people are there. People are ready. Are we getting a formation lap? Hopefully.
I doubt it. I think we'll go straight in because of the glitches. So we got 2, 3, 4, 5 red lights. Lights out and away we go, and it goes straight away. It's a bad start for Franek on the front row. It's their teammate, the reserve driver, Danny, has gotten a better run than them, but now they have to be careful of Vincent Nyquist round the outside, and they both go off the circuit. They go very deep. The reserve driver, Danny Coe, goes up into the lead of the Japanese Grand Prix. Dmitry Minik overtakes Vincent Nyquist, and then Franek has been able to recover to P2, but that is not a good start for the pole sitter. That's not a good start for the driver in P2 in this World Championship so far. And now all of the drivers behind continue to try and get their noses in there, try and get something to happen. There's been a mistake from Norby there in P6. That means that their Ferrari has ghosted briefly. They've now come back to life, and they currently now lead one of the Red Bulls, Kozzy, who dropped down at the race start there. And, well, that's a frantic start to the Japanese Grand Prix, and it's not over yet. The two Mercedes are squabbling still. Up into the hairpin we go, and Danny has lost the lead and almost lost second place as well. They're side by side with Dmitry Minik. Dmitry has gotten in front, and now they'll head down through 200R, and it's continued fighting all the way here. These cars, this new generation of Formula 1 cars, mean that they can fight, and then Vincent Nyquist with an opportunistic move up the inside into the start of the spoon curve section. And that is another position gain for them. What on earth is going on in this race, Reese?
Absolutely a lot. Again, Dmitry demonstrating he is the start master. He is flawless when going to starts. He's not lost one position in this entire series, as Dimitri's looking to take the lead of the race at the start. He's taken out the Mercedes of Frankie. Now that's 100% going to the stewards, but technically Dimitri went from P5 to P1 now and leads the Japanese Grand Prix as Jeremy is going to have to fight with Danny. Danny, who got himself to the lead of the race from the get-go, is falling backwards.
Absolutely, yeah, unfortunate, and you know, I don't want to apportion blame necessarily, but we have seen a number of incidents with Dmitry Minic over the course of this season, outbraking themselves, hitting other drivers in braking zones, things like that. So I think that they're clearly a quick driver, but they need to calm down in racecraft. I think that they're just taking too many risks, and right now it's ruining other drivers' races. I mean, certainly if we think back to Mexico last week, of course I wasn't talking at that point, but I was able to watch along, and when they were in pursuit of Fionn after the pit stops, they did hit into the back of them in a braking zone when they weren't alongside. So these sorts of things, they're things that we have seen from Dmitry Minic, and it's something that they really need to dial out, because otherwise, as you say, these things get referred to stewards give out penalties, and then that will affect their overall finishing position.
Absolutely, and the problem is, I think there's also a bit of age in there as well. I've got a feeling Dimitri's quite a young driver in himself. A lot of these drivers are under the age of 18, so they are a bit more fierce. They're gonna, get their elbows out a little bit more because they want the win. It's the only thing they see when they see blood, as Danny once again is now having to fight with Norby, as Norby in the Ferrari is going to take the inside line through turn 18 and 19. Down the home straight we go, but the straight line speed is looking decent for the Mercedes. Is it decent enough into turn 1? No, because the Norby's going to go down the inside cleanly, allowing himself to put himself into P4, and now Danny's got to look behind and look at Roman. Quickly, Fionn is under pressure by Rookie for P9. So Fionn having a terrible start to his day.
Absolutely, though. That being said, I think it's worth pointing out that we've not had any safety car just yet, so that means that the drivers have kept things relatively clean. But it will then mean, ultimately, that later on in this race, things will start to move towards the likes of Danny and Fionn and Cozzy, because those drivers have hard tyres on their wagon. So all the drivers around them, it would be expected at this early stage of the Grand Prix for them to have more grip. I was more surprised than anything that Danny was able to get themselves into the lead, however briefly, given the grip of the drivers around them, especially with the start they had. It was absolutely monstrous, being able to get off the line with that much speed versus then those tyres around them that were that grade softer. But it does mean then, provided there are no major incidents or safety cars upsetting strategies, then keep an eye on the likes of Danny and Fionn towards the end of this race, because what we've also noticed, I think it's fair to say, over the course of this season, is that Fionn in particular really starts to come alive when the car gets light. When there's less fuel, the tyres have got grip in them towards the end of a race. That's when Fionn really tends to start setting some good lap times and making some good strides. So if that's then their strategy, their play is to go long at the start, get track position, and then of course go on to that softer grade of compound towards the end of the race, then well, keep an eye on them. I think they may well be a threat towards the end of this one. Certainly Danny, I would not count out as being a threat for the race win here, because they're about half a second off the back of Norby at the moment, who in turn is only about 2.5 seconds off the back of Vincent, who is now just about 1 second, now it's a second, off the back of Dmitry Minic. So Danny is not far away at all.
Yeah, just to also note, I don't know if you saw, Jeremy in the Red Bull was P3. He's now down in P17, so something's clearly happened. There's no damage on his car from a visual look. We had him on the screen for a little bit. But critically, that's his race ruined unless this potential overcast ends up being rain. And that, again, you've got drivers that, like Jeremy, Alex Beery, Jerry as well, and Frankie, who, yes, had a terrible start and is now down near the back, could reimburse themselves back near the top if the overcast game plays to its hand, creating a different dynamic to the race. This, of course, means now that Norby is now nearly 3 seconds off the front runners.
Absolutely, yeah. The overcast conditions, of course, they will play their own factor, because if the temperatures are cooler towards the end of this race, then it's going to be harder to fire up the tyres. If that's the case, then you're going to want to be on a softer compound, like the mediums, like the ones which Fionn and Danny and so on are going to go onto towards the end of this race, instead of, say, the old hard tyres that we see being run, that will be being run, I should say, towards the end of this race by those who started on the mediums. And then, of course, the other thing to bear in mind is that if it does start to rain, you also want to then be on, ideally, a younger, softer compound in order to then be able to keep that temperature in them to then get back to the pits and then get the Inters strapped on instead. And Franek has now retired from this session. They've done so in the pit lane, so hopefully we won't see a safety car unless, of course, the game decides to throw a bit of jeopardy in there for the drivers. But as I say, hopefully not the case. And so they have retired and left the session, understandably, after such a good qualifying. And with it likely that, given that this is Suzuka, and even though these cars are great at following one another, there are still less overtakes happening than we've seen at other rounds in the season. Think back to the likes of Miami, for example, overtakes pretty much every single lap. You know, so in that instance, if there's not many overtakes happening, then it's not very likely that people are going to make mistakes, which means it's not very likely there's going to be crashes, which means it's not very likely to be a safety car. So for those who've dropped all the way to the back of the field, it's a bit of a bitter pill to swallow. So I can understand, but you know, there's also the saying of never say never, never give up. And there might then be the thought of what might have been, and Kinty has retired from the session.
Yeah, I think he's gone into the wall.
So in second, and then, oh no, a safety car has come out! A safety car has come out right to the point I was talking about. Safety cars might not come out at all. So what's happened to Kinty is they have lost it on the exit of Spoon Curve. They've gone right to the inside barrier. And lost it there, so that would have potentially brought Franek back into this race, but they've left, they've retired, it's all over for them. So unfortunately for them, that's your lot, I'm afraid.
So a couple of drivers diving into the pits, Matteo and Roman deciding, you know what, it's worth the opportunity to take it. Jeremy also going for it. Elliot, Jerry going into there as well. So they're changing up their strategy very quickly, which means they're putting on hard tyres. I think Jerry's going to go for the mediums. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out. Of course, they're near the back of the grid. They have this opportunity to spice things up, change it a little bit, and see how that runs. Now, up at front, you know, initially, I think Dimitri backed up the pack quite a lot when the safety car was released, and we saw the pack squeeze up together and then spread out massively when he went down the straight. So was he considering going into the pits or try and bait Vincent into the pits as well?
It's all things which are to be considered, but ultimately we've discovered then that it's all come to naught. Those drivers at the head of the field have decided to stay out. I think it's an interesting choice by those deciding to go in for fresh hards at this point in the race, because I don't think they're safe. I don't think they'll be able to get those tyres all the way to the end, because we looked back to the likes of, say, you know, Spa, for example. The soft tyres would last about sort of 6 laps, the mediums about sort of 11, 12 laps, and then the hards about sort of 15 laps or so. Now, that's a race which under 50% conditions is a 22-lap race. We've got 5 additional laps here, so you can imagine that maybe the tyre wear is going to be a similar value to Spa, and then proportionally you stretch it out over those extra 5 laps. I think then that means that the hard tyres, you're realistically looking about sort of 17, 18 laps maybe. We've got 21 laps to go in this race. There's still a really quite significant period of time here that the drivers have got to go, and I think that those on the hards might struggle.
Yes, I can agree with that. The hards will struggle in the latter stages, and those medium runners, you know, I don't know. It could go either way. I want to quickly talk about Yannick in 8th place. He's gained a mountain of positions. We had I think it was 7. I could just double check, but I think it's 7 he's gained. So brilliant start of the stint for him. Lap 7, P8. I'd be happy with where I am, and now in a position to fight the likes of Rookie and Fion. Now, Fion also has not had a great start to his race, started in P9. Luckily, has been able to push himself up to P6 after a couple of drivers crashing out, and also a couple of drivers diving into the pits. Happily to say, you know, we mentioned about Kozzy. He's still in P5 comfortably, and from the get-go, looking to do all right, holding his own.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that those 3 who are immediately behind the top 3, those who are on hard tyres, so Danny, Kozzy, and Fion, now should be considered big threats to the win of this race, and to those 3 drivers ahead, because with those hard tyres on, they can go very deep in this race. If they're not able to survive to the crossover point, if rain does come, then they'll still be on much better tyres to be able to take advantage of that earlier period when the track is sort of slick but not quite damp enough for the intermediate tyres. Now, when you then take all of that on board and you think about, okay, well, they're going to be going nice and deep, they're going to be able to burn all the fuel off, they're going to be able to do this, that, and the other. I think that those drivers are now, realistically speaking, going to be your top 3 in this race, unless, of course, there are some heroics from the likes of Dimitri, Vincent, or Norby. But yeah, my intuition, shall we say, is to put my my money there if I had money. So.
If we all had money, I think we would put it there. Safety car is in this lap, and now Dimitri becomes the effective safety car. He controls the pace of the pack, and for sure, he will want to take it slow around the final 2 behind the Castillo chicane, as he will probably pounce on the exit of the chicane. Here we go. He's leaving it a lot later. He's definitely waiting a lot of time, but this has allowed Vincent to get nice and close. But Vincent is not napping. Vincent is on the prowl for an attack, and he's going to look to do it into turn 1. It's always nearly squeezed into the wall, and through turn 1 we go. Vincent is looking for the inside line. He is still side by side with Dimitri, and he will force Dimitri wide, but Dimitri having the inside line into the S as we go. Turn 3, turn 4. It will be side by side through a lot of this section, but Vincent decides to yield to not risk anything more.
Absolutely. The other thing that they had to be careful of there was by going side by side, it was just allowing Norby, who didn't get a great safety car restart, to then get all the closer and become potentially a threat to them as they continue to duke it out. But as it is, they've been able to now sort themselves out. It's pretty much as you were from the safety car restart. But now we've got Fionn up the inside of Cozzy there into the hairpin. And now, as they head up and out of the exit, then there's no wheel spin or oversteering moments for Fionn. There was a little bit for Cozzy. And now, Cozzy has the inside line in 200R, so that means then they'll be ahead by the time they get into the Dunlop curve. Not the Dunlop curve, the Spoon curve, rather. And then it's them back in lead. Crucially, this is giving Danny all of the breathing space in the world, and also the opportunity to now just have a little bit of a sniff at the back of the Ferrari, because it'll be around about this time, maybe in a couple of laps or so, when I imagine the medium tyres will start to have a bit of a crossover with the hards, and the hards will start to become faster.
Gone.
The mediums won't be done. Oh dear! Oh, that's a big old incident. It's caught up another couple of cars in the back as well. Dazed Rhombus has been caught up there, so has the Aston Martin. Oh, and there's a big spin there for Alex Perry as well. That's a big incident for all the cars involved, and that, I think, has all come from Cozzy just losing it on the braking going into the chicane there, and that's meant they've had to come into the pits, get a brand new nose cone on that Red Bull.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a critical moment. Cozzy is going to retire. Such a good race from Cozzy. No, it's so unfortunate. He takes his first DNF of the season, and it's sad to see, because it's so easy if you put too much steering lock into 130R, that's where the oversteer kicks in, and bang, you just end up going into the wall, and exactly what's happened. And for the drivers behind, unfortunately, I was focused on Joris, who was looking to go and take Yankee. That is unfortunate for those drivers, and has absolutely ruined some of the strategy for the rest of the drivers.
Absolutely has. Unfortunately, that's racing. It will happen. You'll get caught up in incidents that are absolutely not your fault. But now, it means that things just become that little bit more tense up at the front of the field, because with 3 drivers on the hard tyres right behind the top 3, it meant that, well, they might end up squabbling amongst themselves and slowing each other up and all that sort of thing. Now, no longer the case. Now Fionn has to catch up towards the back of Danny, who's on the back of the Ferrari of Norby at the moment, and crucially is not being shaken by the Ferrari driver, nor are they being shaken by the Alfa Romeo and McLaren driver up in P1 and 2 in this race. The two of them very close to one another. DRS has now been enabled on the 3rd lap of racing after the safety car came in. But of course, it won't be active until the start of next lap, because there is only one DRS zone on this circuit. It's that start-finish straight we've just seen them all go through. And now we'll have to wait and see whether Vincent Nyquist is able to stick with Dimitri Minic for the rest of this lap. What we did see on the last stint, if you will, was that when DRS did become enabled, Dimitri then just put the power down, scampered away and got that 1 second buffer that they needed, and then that meant they were relatively safe from Vincent over the next few laps, until, of course, then that safety car came out. Now, that is looking to be what's happening once again. So Vincent is losing time now. They're losing touch. It was about 2 tenths at the start of the lap between the two of them. It's now 6.5 tenths. As we watch still with Danny Coe, as Rookie gets a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane. And I imagine that's, yep, there we go, the confirmation there. Rookie has now also retired, so we've lost 4 runners from this Japanese Grand Prix, as their AI equips some soft tyres just for a last hurrah, perhaps, I don't know. But there we are. So we continue to watch Danny going round Spoon Curve, and they are still very close, hanging on like a limpet to the back of the Ferrari of Norby in front.
He's been ever so close, but I don't think he has the ERS. I don't know what his percentage is. Can you give me a number?
I can give you a number. It is currently 78%
So
for Danny.
He's clearly not using it then. He's not exactly attacking.
Oh, big spin! Big spin for Vincent Nyquist! Vincent Nyquist spins going into the pit lane. Sorry to talk over the top of you there, but they had a massive half spin. They managed to keep it outside of the wall, I think. I don't know if there's any damage on there. We'll see in a moment if the McLaren pit crew decide to replace the front wing. They don't. So that's a lucky thing for them, but that's going to mean that they have now lost absolutely bucket loads of time. Any hope of an undercut on Dmitry Minic has gone out the window there.
Oh dear. This Japanese race is full of errors today, and I'm glad to be back at Japan. This is really taking a toll on these drivers because this track is so technical. I said to you, you know, if your setup isn't right, it will cause you to oversteer in some areas, understeer in others, and you have to nail your setup correctly. Clearly, some drivers aren't fully tuned to their car and are making critical mistakes. And who's that in 6th place, battling away? And I think that's with Yankee as Jerry Van Bussel. Yeah, Jerry Van Bussel making his way up through the field. So a poor qualifying for him, but he's doing a Dimitri today and climbing up the board.
Absolutely, yeah. Very fortunate with the safety car coming out to allow the pack to bunch up once more, that they can then get a brand new set of medium tyres on. And this could actually be an inspired strategy here because, of course, those medium tyres will have had 3 laps under safety car. So realistically, you're looking at only maybe 2, maybe 3 laps worth of full racing conditions run on them when you take into account the wear that will have come inevitably from 3 laps under safety car. And they then are going to be trying their absolute best to get back up the field, though they've used most of their ERS to do it. They're now just at 1% charge as they head down into turn number 1. There's not many big heavy braking areas around this circuit which will allow you to regenerate ERS, so that's going to be a big Achilles heel of theirs for the rest of this race. For the likes of Fionn, for the likes of Danny Coe, they're both in the very high percentages. 83 for Fionn, 72 for Danny, and then for the 2 cars in front, you're then looking at 33 for Norby and 44 for Dmitry Minic. So advantage very much to these hard tyre runners in P3 and 4 at the moment, I would say, especially after what happened with Vincent Nyquist.
Absolutely, and can we mention our good boy old Danny, P3 again. He's back in the podium position. He is looking ever so mighty as Jerry Van Bussel loses a position, as we don't catch that on camera, but he loses a position to Yankee once again. And Yankee, where did he start? Honestly, that man has gained 10 positions now. So he has come from P15. He is currently in P5. This man on screen is out for blood today, and it is lovely to see a couple of new faces really get involved, as I think Danny is in danger of losing his position as Fionn is going to go down the inside into Cassio chicane, and brilliant move done. Now, does Danny get the DRS, or is it Fionn's? It's going to be Fionn's, or they both get it because they're close enough. But that is so unfortunate for Danny, but it's not the end. It's all to play for.
It's all to play for, and, you know, it would be absolute heroics. It would be super sub territory if they were able to come in as a reserve driver, first race of the season, and then go and smack out a win. But for Fionn, this presents an excellent opportunity. Their main title rival, their teammate, having that big mistake into the pit lane. They will have seen that big mistake as well, as they would have driven past it, as Alex Berry is now retired from this race as well in the pit lane. So they are out as well. But yeah, Fionn then now in a good position, climbing up the order, and clearly has the pace here to get onto the back of these cars in front. Now, will they have the pace to then go ahead and overtake them on track and then stay ahead of them before the end of this stint? That's then the next thing to wonder about. The other thing that I'm wondering is then what's going on with Dimitri and Norby as far as strategy is concerned, because if we were expecting them to respond to the undercut threat from Vincent, then they would have come into the pits by now. But they haven't. They've decided to keep out for a bit longer. So do they know something that we don't in terms of their tyre wear or the weather that's coming or anything like that? Who's to say?
Has our newly formed Jeff told him weathering coming in 5 minutes, and it takes about another 10 minutes to come down. Unknown to everybody. And again, Fionn, he's 3 tenths behind Norby. He's definitely putting in the pace now. These hard tyres coming alive, and those mediums I don't think are up to pace. So we won't be long before we seeing the Ferrari. He looked at it. He looked at it.
Big oversteer moment.
Yeah, and that's going to allow Fionn to come right up the inside. Outside, actually. No, back to the inside. Oh, that's going to be risky. Into turn 1 we go, as he will push the Ferrari out the way. Fionn directly behind his championship rival, which will be Dimitri, because I said the top 3 of the championship are all there to fight. And Dimitri, he thought it was a done deal early on. Oh, it's all to play for today.
It certainly is. It certainly is. Good bit of fighting there between Fionn and Norby. I think maybe a little bit a sort of early Verstappen career from Norby, you know, reacting to where the driver behind is going rather than deciding where you're going to go first, which isn't against the rules, I don't believe. Certainly not in Formula 1. They got rid of the Verstappen rule many years ago. In fact, in the same year it was introduced. And big, deep moment on the brakes for Dimitri Minic. That means that they are massively vulnerable coming out of the hairpin. This could be an overtake into the spoon curve here if we're lucky. And if Fionn decides to go for it, they're getting closer and closer all the time. Will they go for it? No, they decided very wisely, I think, to just follow through in the spoon curve. And then it looks like they get a little bit of a better exit here, and they get onto the ERS just to get their car moving that little bit quicker, especially in that lower rev range in the gears, and similar sort of deployment, although for a bit longer for Dimitri, but it hasn't really done them all that much in the way of benefit. They go now down into Casio Triangle, and we've got then this Mickey Mouse section to go through here then, and then into the start-finish straight once more, and then there's a bit of a better exit in the initial phase for Dimitri, but now Fionn really bringing it towards the Alfa Romeo driver, now to the outside, into turn number 1. Will they be able to do it? Fionn goes up the around the outside, but not then sticking there. They actually braked early. They tried to get the up and under done, but Dimitri, their good sense of where to place the car on the brakes, because they didn't outbrake themselves. They didn't go too wide. They didn't go and put themselves in a vulnerable position. Instead, they just had a brilliant sense of where to put the car, and they keep Fionn behind for at least another lap. Meanwhile, behind them, Danny has gotten by a pitting Norby.
Yeah, and critically, just to make it clear, Vincent is really in this in a position. I don't know if that's cut too. No, it hasn't. Hello. Vincent is really close the gap. He's only 2 seconds off Norby. So technically, he's not fully out of this race himself. So we said hello to the 2 at the front, but Vincent isn't done. Look, he's closing down Norby, and Norby was comfortably in second not too long ago. Well, he was in third, and then before he pitted. So Vincent doing this alternative strategy after a poor dilemma might come into his favour now.
Absolutely, yeah. You can tell looking at the onboards that the pressure is on now for Dimitri Minic, because they are using ERS a lot more. And now look at this going down into the woods of the chicane. It's like Senna and Prost in 89 up the inside, and this time there's no contact, unlike the 2 McLaren drivers of yesteryear. And into the pits on the hard tyre goes Fionn. They're going to go into the pits. They're going to get and a big shunt there for Dimitri Minic. They were never going to hit the back of Fionn, but they just, I don't know whether they just were
medium to medium,
brakes, whether they lost the car. They've lost their front wing there. So that's going to be a slow stop for them, or a damaged car for the rest of this race. It's going to be a damaged car for the rest of this race, actually, as it turns out. The mechanics did not fix that, so if you see there, when they come out on the left-hand side of their front wing, their end plate is completely gone. Vince Nyquist also has not been able to overtake these 2. They're coming out of the pits now. He goes round the outside of Dimitri, which I'm sure they would have done soon anyway, given the damage to that car. But now Fionn, on fresher tyres, on softer tyres, is in the effective race lead here, unless, of course, Danny is able to produce the overcut of their life.
It has spiced up indeed. Danny still running his running it down this race. He technically does have a driver ahead of him. It's a back marker. He could use this driver as a bit of DRS for one more lap, going for a strong in lap. But the positioning of where these other drivers are, 10 seconds, you've got a load of other drivers that make up a little bit of time. I don't think so. So I see this driver coming into the pits.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Reese, but I think this is going to be Danny's in-lap because they have used a lot of ERS this lap, and as they went through the second sector split, they were 4/10 up on their personal best. This has been a very quick in-lap from Danny Coe here. The remaining Mercedes in this race, they get stopped on the marks nicely. Into the box they go. They get up onto the jacks, the tyres get changed, and then out they go straight away. Now, where is this going to shape them out versus then those cars they were racing against? We've got Fionn coming through the final chicane now. I think this is going to be a masterstroke by the Mercedes driver. I think they're going to be able to come out ahead here. They're coming down towards now where they can get up to speed once more, and they have a huge lead. A huge lead.
Wow.
This is going to be the effective race lead for Danny Coe.
Wow, what a strategy move from Danny. That was playing the game perfectly. The overcut working brilliantly for the Mercedes driver. And that is a masterclass right there. He started this race in second. He takes the lead. He falls back down the field. And now he's in first. The problem is, and I will point this out, he's on cold medium tyres. So now all he has to do is defend as Fionn is really pushing hard. He's going to go down. Oh, no! He tried his luck into the Degner curve, and the first Degner cost him dear. Fionn was greedy and has critically put himself into the wall.
Yeah, that was just way too ambitious from Fionn there. Even with cold tyres, the car in front is not going to brake for Degner 1. They're just going to lift off, maybe shift down a gear, and then chuck the car in. Now, Fionn didn't even have their front wing alongside the rear wheels there of the Mercedes. So that was desperation, I think, from a driver who saw that they'd been overcut, who saw that there was now a race lead disappearing from them, and a potential win to get points over their championship rival. Now, I'm thinking it's fairly certain they're going to be finishing behind their championship rival here.
Absolutely, that you're going to be majorly behind. Like, we know Vincent's going to have to stop again because his tyres won't last to the end. But you don't make a bold move like that unless you are already beside him. He was nowhere near, and that's critically shattered his race. Though, looking ahead, the drivers that haven't pitted yet, Matteo De Campo, he's trying to hunt down Roman. These guys are going to pit. They're going to drop down the field. It's going to allow Danny to go into first. Elliot's in Dreamland, our tier coordinator. He's absolutely in Dreamland right now. You know, in the politest way speaking, but you can't take your mind off that incident, can't you?
No, that was, I mean, you could sort of see it happening before it did. You know, Fionn was very keen to get past, but they ultimately just ended up having it was ambition over adhesion, I think, ultimately, as Martin Brundle would say, and just ended up running out of talent, if we want to continue with the Brundleisms. But there we are then. That's then the effective race lead now very much secure in the hands of Danny Coe. They now need to use these medium tyres over the next 9 laps that they've got to run them on, with a lighter car than those who ran for as long as 15 laps earlier on those tyres. I think that's going to be more than easy for them to do. They've been sending purple sectors all the way through this lap. I think this is going to be a fairly unassailable, unless of course someone pits for softs late on, fastest lap of the race. Let's find out. Let's wait and see as they come across the line. And yep, that is most definitely the fastest lap of the race. 1:31.3 for Danny Coe, as our attention now shifts to the drivers currently in third and second, and that being of course Matteo De Campo and Romain Foulon up in second, third at the moment. Will not stay second and third once they have pitted, of course, as you rightly pointed out earlier on, but it's definitely a good effort from them to have been able to get from their starting positions quite some way down the order. I think it's fair to say. Let's have a look here. Yep, so both of them up 8 positions from where they started, so that would have been a P10 and P11 start respectively for Roman and Mattia. But Jerry in particular has done very well indeed, is up 11 positions. However, they also now carry a time penalty, and that being of 8 seconds worth of penalties in fact. So that's 1 5-second penalty presumably for speeding the pit lane or something like that, or speeding under yellow flags during a safety car, or possibly something like that, and then the 3 seconds likely to come from something like corner cuts rating or some such thing. So, unfortunate for them, because it's been a very good recovery drive from them so far, but we all know it's going to come to an end at some point. And I doubt they're going to be able to take those mediums all the way to the end. A big oversteer moment, in fact, for the Williams. So now, refocusing on what's going on here between Mattia and Roman. They're on similar sort of ERS charges at the moment, about 10% in favour of Roman. But crucially, neither of them really using it down the start-finish straight. So Mattia seems to be fairly happy in just sitting in the DRS of Roman in front. Maybe they just realised that the pace between them is so similar that if they jumped in front, they'd end up just going and DRS passes next one another lap after lap. It would slow them both down. So this way, they maximise both of their results.
Possibly indeed. I want to add a little bit of spice into this. Are you ready for it?
Ooh, go on. Tell me more.
On the screen, I have presented to everybody that the guys ahead of Danny, first to fourth, have all stopped once. Okay, they stopped quite early on, and that's proven when I go to the statistic of what tyre lap they're on. Tyre lap age is around about 14. Now, Jerry Van Bossel is more likely to pit because of those medium tyres. But is there a chance that they could push these hard tyres for another 7 laps? Their pace isn't massively bad. Like, Danny isn't closing like at a greater rate. He's not closing a second a lap. So in theory, if they decide to just stick it out, at least Roman, Matty and Elliott have potential for sure to take the podium. Unfortunately, Jerry, I feel his tyres are going to go and he will have to pit. But just there you go. There's Jerry in the pits. But these other three...
As you say so, yeah.
These other three could stay out to the end and decide, you know what? I'm just going to keep going and be a pain in the neck.
Yeah, we've got yellow flags in sector 1. That's actually Dimitri Minic, who's fallen all the way back down to the back of the order here in the Alfa Romeo. And they're on hard tyres, 3 laps old, just in front of the race leaders, in fact, going through the S's right now. So I must have missed entirely what happened to Dimitri there. We've seen, obviously, what happened to Fionn. But Dimitri, it might well be that the damage, in fact, was too severe on that front wing end plate, and they needed to come in for that second stop, perhaps. That would be my educated guess. But I mean, in terms of whether these tyres would get to the end, I'm not entirely certain of that for the hard runners that we see, because ultimately, you know, they've had a few laps under safety car, sure, but to go over, it will be over 20 laps by the end of this Grand Prix. To go over 20 laps on one set of tyres, even if they are hard tyres, I think that's asking too much of those tyres. They're either going to puncture or they're going to go off the cliff. And whilst Danny, as you say, is not catching them a massive amount right now, at this rate, they would only really catch Elliott by the end of the race. But I think that the tyres are just going to give way, lose a massive amount of performance, and then possibly puncture before we get to the end of this race.
To be honest, if I was in their position, I've done my mandatory pit stop, assuming they have switched over from a medium to hard. Screw it. Why not do it? You're not the, especially if your name's Elliott, he's not scored a point on this championship. Matteo, I think he scored maybe lower points. Roman, again, lower points as well. You're in that low section. Screw it. I would be in that position to go, yeah, I'm just going to take this risk. At least I'm going to get a decent heap of points, even if they do run off. And if I have to pit, okay, I've not lost out too much. I've ran a good race. So we're kind of juggling with ideas, and it could go 50-50. That's the way I'm seeing it. It's a 50-50 opportunity. Yes, you're right in saying these tyres are going to be dead by the end of the race. But why not? Especially because if you're in second place, well, even first, I think you could just see where Elliott's time on the screen. He ain't closing. Might as well just give it a shot.
Certainly worth thinking about, and I think that, you know, with regards to their previous performances, if we take a look at Roman, they've had a DNF, they've had a 0-point score, they've then had a 2-point score and a 5-point score. So the 5-point score there being 6th place, and the 2-point score being a 9th place. So, you know, they have scored on a couple of occasions, but not been massive points all. So this would definitely be their best finish of the season. If they were to go ahead and take the win, or even just any podium position here, or even anywhere in the top 5, in fact. For then the likes of Mattia, well, Mattia they've had 2 5th places and a 6th place, with 1 DNS as well. In the same race, in fact, that Vincent Nyquist did not start as well. So they've had some reasonably good mid-points finishes, but nothing approaching a podium finish or anything like that. So it's definitely looking good for these guys, but whether or not they're going to be able to maintain this pace and then finish the race at that pace is a whole other thing that's going to need considering. The other thing that needs considering, of course, is we've had this threat of the great big looming clouds above us all race long, and whether or not they might end up becoming a factor. Now, one driver who might become a factor for getting some more points soon might be Fion. They've now been able to drag themselves all the way back up now to just about a second off the back of Days Rhombus at the moment. So not really in a position to be able to make an overtake just yet, but they're getting there. They're getting nice and close. They've used a lot of their ERS to do so, but crucially, so has Rhombus. So both of them are hovering around about 10%. So if one driver has DRS, the other one doesn't, it's going to give them that extra opportunity just to have one chance to send it down the inside in turn number 1, or maybe close up on them somewhere else around the circuit. So Fion might well be able to get some more points on the board soon. If they do, then that might preserve their championship leads, even though Vincent is on to score 6 points currently with that 5th position. But then we see, of course, Danny Coe, not any danger of losing their position at all, unless, of course, there's a big accident between themselves and Elliott or any of the other drivers in front. And they are rapidly closing that gap down now to Elliott, because I think the penny has dropped for them. I think they've realised, actually, these guys may well go to the end and their tyres might survive. So I really need to get the hammer down and see if I can catch them. So that's the thing for them to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. Theon is slowly making inroads onto Days Rhombus. I want to stay and true to my good rival, Days Rhombus. I've raced with him multiple times, and I know this guy can race, so he needs to put his elbows out. This is fair points for him. P8, that's what... I think the system's slightly different, but that's 4 points, isn't it? But get your elbows out. Definitely fight for your position, because Theon, yes, he's closing the ground. He's not fast enough, but Days Rhombus is also caught up to Joris in P7, so we might be seeing a little battle near the end of the race. Danny is now 2 seconds behind Elliott, and Elliott is... So I can imagine him breathing down the mic if there's one there. His heart beating fast, because he knows there's a good heap of points and possible podium here, and he will decide to get his elbows out for sure with limited number of laps on this race.
Absolutely, yeah. We've not seen Elliott be shy about their defensive driving at previous rounds. Miami in particular comes to mind. The Miami Minister of Defense, we could call them. But some of the moves there, potentially a bit on the dodgy side, maybe. It depends on your perspective, I suppose. But, you know, it's right on the line of fair but firm, I think, is their defensive style. And now, as Danny heads down into turn number 1, we've got just 1.2 seconds the gap now, and I believe it's around about 2 point something the previous lap. So definitely catching at a good rate at the moment, and have about 20 ERS percentage charge more. That was a butchery of that particular sentence, wasn't it? But they've got 20% more ERS, there we go, than Elliott does at the moment. So it's looking good for them in terms of their ability to fight Elliott, and it's now dropped under a second, that gap. Now things are going to be a bit more difficult in terms of actually catching the back of Elliott, because of course dirty air, even though it's much reduced in this generation of Formula 1 cars, still exists because we're still travelling through air. So that's something that they've got to consider. But now, out of the hairpin, it's out those slow traction zones in particular. That's where those fresher tyres, those softer compound tyres, really gain Danny a huge amount of time. And now, less than 4/10 the gap as they head through Spoon. This sustained long corner is also going to be another instance where those fresh tyres are going to give them massive amounts of grip. It's down the straights where Elliott is going to stand more of a chance here. But I think that if Danny is smart about it, they're going to stick in behind Elliott, get the DRS on them by following them through the Casio chicane, and then get them on the start-finish straight, and then use those tyres throughout the rest of the lap to then try and pull away. So through the chicane they go. In that slow traction zone, they've got much better exit. They gain by a tenth and a half out of the exit alone, and then onto the straight we go, and it's not even a contest. Look at that.
Easy done, but Danny now has some work. He's only got 2 laps to catch up with the battling 2 at the front. Talking of battle, I was going to say Days Rumbus had lost his ground with the person in 8th place, which would be Yoris, but he's closed that gap brilliantly. So there's battle for 7th, all to play for as well, as Yakniar, he's 5-second tire penalty for speeding in the pits. I think that might be a retirement for him, possibly. But
I think that's a late fast lap attempt, actually.
Ooh, okay. But he won't get the points, though, so that's...
They won't, but they'll deny it for someone else.
Exactly. But we're going to focus on this battle, because Fion's been right up the rear end of Days Rumbus, and he did make Days step back a bit.
Oh, there's a move!
Yeah, how the...
Look at that!
No,
big mistake from Mattia De Campo there.
Yeah.
Yeah, big mistake. I was just, whilst we were having a look at this battle on the broadcast, I was just having a look at what was going on with Mattia. And yeah, big mistake for them. I think their tyres have gone off, in fact. I think there may be a slow puncture or just a massive loss in grip on those tyres, because they have now also lost the position to Elliott. And Elliott was not massively close, and they've already then lost a half a second, 3/4 of a second to Elliott. In fact, a whole second now to Elliott. So on this final lap of the Grand Prix, I think it's well within the realms of possibility. If Roman have cooked their tyres too much, they could end up losing massive amounts of pace and performance, and they could end up falling down into the clutches of Danny here. Definitely something that could happen, as Fion has now gotten by Days Rhombus here, and now threatens the back of Mattia. There they go. Days Rhombus gets back up in front of the McLaren, and now they will head down into turn number 1. Those positions are then locked in for the next few corners, I'm sure, because the S's, of course, you're not going to see any overtakes there. Danny is catching. Danny is catching at a rate of knots at the moment. They have caught just on the start sector alone by half a second. Now, they need to catch a lot more than that to be able to then overhaul this 2.5 second lead that Roman now has, but it is coming down all the time. Just in one corner there, they've gained 2 tenths. If the time continues to be lost by Roman, and if their tyres go off crucially, then this could be a surprise win for the Super Sub. But Roman here, still putting in an absolutely Herculean effort. They're 9 positions up from their starting place. Elliott is 14 positions up from their starting position, and this is all shaping out to be a fantastic finale to this race. Days Rhombus, of course, is now just 9/10 of a second back from Yoris. Beyond is just 4/10 back from them, but up at the front, it's now 2 seconds a gap between Danny and Roman, but I think that it's all going to be 1 lap too late for Danny, and Roman here is going to come through the final chicane. After an absolutely alternate strategy where they weren't even thought to be a competitor for a long old time, they've surprised us all. They come through the final turn. They win the Japanese Grand Prix. Danny comes home as the Super Sub in second, just 1.5 seconds off of Roman there, catching them by over a second in that final lap. And then Elliott will come through to claim P3. Vincent Nyquist recovers to P4. Norby P5. Yoris P6. Days Rhombus does finish ahead of Fion for the end there. Jerry Van Bussel comes across the line in 9th, but that might well become 10th after penalties. Mattia will come round the final corner, and will they get up into P9? No, they won't. They stay in P10. So that is secured for Jerry Van Bussel. And then Yannick will be next across the line in the Alpine. And then behind them, by quite some distance, will be Jeremy.
Absolutely. What a race this ended up to be. Roman, you're a winner! You've won the Japanese Grand Prix after what was not your greatest start. Wow. And we have to actually now, we have to kind of give a bit of respect now to Elliott. He got himself a good bag of points. Our tier coordinator in P3. He's not scored. I think he's got like 1 point in this season, and look what he's got.
Not even one.
Not even one.
That's their first point score.
Wow, what a way to get points in P3, and that is brilliant to see. Roman is probably screaming and probably just gave himself a noise complaint, but Elliott, driver of the day has to be the top 3 who went out of the top 3 because they did an absolutely amazing job. Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, I would not be able to choose between any of the top 3 as driver of the day, to be honest with you. I think that, there's an argument to be made for Roman making that excellent at strategy work, keeping the tyres alive, crucially, enough to be able to fend off the late race advance of Danny. Danny, of course, being a reserve driver. They've not even raced once in this season so far, except for the very first round where they didn't score any points at all. In that, they've now gone ahead and bagged second, almost got first, almost qualified on pole, in fact. So it was a fantastic effort from them. I think they, no, they did not. Yannick got the fastest lap, so good for them. I think it would have been Danny who would have gotten fastest lap if not for that late stop to the softs from Yannick. But then, of course, the other driver, of course, on the podium, Elliot, yeah, very, very good effort from them. From P17 on the grid to third. It's not a bad shout at all. So I think I'll leave that up to the court of public opinion, to be perfectly honest with you. That's the way I'll organise that. So to quickly recap then, Roman, Danny, Elliot, Vincent, Norby, Joris, Days Rhombus, Fion, Jerry, Mattia, Yannick, Jeremy, Dimitri, Alex, Rookie, Kozzy, and Kinty. Round out your order for that race there. Just managed to get them all in before it then disappeared off of my screen. But there we go. So, brilliant race. Overall, I think it was a nice race for me to come back to. Yeah, we've got. I mean, that's us basically at the halfway point of the season. Not quite. We've got 11 rounds, not 10. But after round 5, there we've now got some. We've got our chief championship protagonist in the form of Fion and Vincent. I believe Vincent now takes the lead of the Drivers' Championship with that result, although it won't be by much, because I think Fion did still score there, didn't they? They did still score, and Vincent didn't score massively. So I think that it won't be by much. They might even be tied on points, but again, a couple of wins for Vincent versus just the one for Fion means that if they are tied on points, Vincent will be the one ahead. And then Dimitri, of course, non-score there, finishing dead last of all of the finishers and the only driver to be lapped. That's not what the former, actually it will be now, third place in the championship will have wanted.
No, it's definitely not what you're going to see from his performance. There were some, I don't want to say easy mistakes, because I think where they were on the track are more technical areas, and we have to remember we're not nothing like tier 1, we're tier 5, the F5 championship, so they are a little bit lower. There are going to be mistakes from them. They're about, 10 tiers in this championship. So there are still going to be some odd mistakes here and there. So it's subject to could they have been avoided? Yes, no, you don't know. We just can't answer that question. What we can answer is where we're going next, which happens to be my favourite track to commentate, which is the beautiful Monza circuit in Italy. And it's been my favourite because it always packs some great action in Monza, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Certainly does. The Temple of Speed earns its name, I think it's fair to say. And on this game, of course, where we have the 0-0 wings setup phenomenon, I imagine that the cars will be going incredibly fast around Monza. But we will let you sit and think about that until next time, ladies and gentlemen, because that is our show. So thank you very much for joining us. Join us this time and place next week in order to see the Italian Grand Prix. You'll be joined once again by myself, Daniel Gilligan, and alongside me in the virtual commentary box, of course, is Rhys Gregory. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night.
This broadcast was brought to you by GT Omega and Grid Rival, proudly supporting PSGL.